Republican Senator Lindsey Graham introduced legislation to lay the groundwork for deploying U.S. military force against Mexican cartels, marking a departure from traditional diplomatic approaches. What made this attack different from previous cartel violence against Americans? And why did it transform fringe military intervention ideas into mainstream policy proposals being seriously considered in Washington? The Breaking Point Incident. The details of what happened in Matamoros reveal why this particular incident crossed a threshold that previous cartel violence had not reached. Four American tourists had traveled to the border town for medical procedures when Gulf Cartel gunmen kidnapped them in a case of mistaken identity, believing they were Haitian smugglers operating in cartel territory. Two of the Americans were murdered during their captivity, while the other two survived the ordeal that lasted several days before Mexican authorities recovered them. What made this attack fundamentally different from previous incidents was not just the deliberate targeting of Americans, but the cartel's immediate recognition that they had crossed a line. Unlike previous cases where cartels had claimed confusion or denied responsibility, the Gulf Cartel quickly apprehended the alleged perpetrators and turned them over to Mexican authorities while issuing public apologies through intermediaries. This unprecedented response revealed the organization's understanding that killing American tourists would trigger consequences they were not prepared to face. The aftermath demonstrated how Gulf and Sinaloa cartels have grown increasingly brazen in their high-profile attacks on American citizens, showing a level of operational confidence that extends far beyond traditional criminal organizations. The Matamoros incident occurred in broad daylight in a border town where American medical tourists regularly travel, indicating that cartels no longer consider proximity to the United States border a deterrent to violent action. This brazenness reflected their evolution into quasi-military organizations capable of challenging both Mexican government forces and international boundaries. Republican leaders, who had previously approached cartel intervention with measured responses, immediately escalated their rhetoric following the confirmed deaths. Senator Lindsey Graham announced plans to introduce legislation that would lay the groundwork for the Biden administration to deploy military force against Mexican cartels, marking a significant departure from traditional diplomatic approaches to cross-border violence. This proposal represented the first serious congressional effort to authorize military intervention, specifically targeting cartel operations rather than supporting Mexican government efforts. The political transformation became evident as lawmakers who had spent years advocating for diplomatic solutions began acknowledging that traditional approaches had reached their limits. The incident provided concrete evidence that cartels were willing to kill Americans without regard for potential consequences, fundamentally altering the risk calculation that had previously kept military intervention off the table. Defense policy experts who had opposed military action against cartels started examining potential intervention scenarios, while former State Department officials began questioning whether diplomatic engagement could address organizations that operated with such impunity. Congressional offices reported unprecedented constituent pressure demanding military retaliation, with phone systems becoming overwhelmed in the days following the Matamoros murders. The public outcry reflected a growing perception that cartel violence had escalated beyond what law enforcement and diplomatic measures could effectively address. Polling conducted in the weeks after the incident showed dramatic increases in support for military action against cartels, with numbers reaching levels not seen since the immediate aftermath of major terrorist attacks. The families of the Matamoros victims became vocal advocates for stronger government response, meeting with key political figures and amplifying pressure for decisive action against the cartels. Their advocacy helped transform military intervention from a fringe position into mainstream policy discussion that included moderate Democrats and traditional foreign policy establishment figures. The personal testimonies of affected families provided emotional weight that abstract policy debates had previously lacked, creating sustained momentum for more aggressive measures. Social media. Amplification of the incident generated millions of shares across platforms, creating viral content that sustained public attention far longer than typical news cycles. The graphic nature of cartel violence, combined with the clear innocence of the victims, created emotional resonance that traditional diplomatic responses could not satisfy. Hashtags demanding military intervention maintained trending status for days, while online groups organizing protests outside Mexican diplomatic facilities grew rapidly in membership and activity. The Gulf Cartel's damage control efforts, including their unprecedented apology and handover of alleged perpetrators, failed to reduce political pressure for military retaliation. Many officials viewed the cartel's coordinated response as evidence of their organizational sophistication rather than genuine remorse, arguing that groups capable of such rapid damage control possessed the operational capacity to prevent such incidents in the first place. The cartel's ability to quickly identify and surrender suspects demonstrated command structures that resembled military organizations more than traditional criminal enterprises. The incident transformed political discourse around cartel violence, with phrases like act of war and terrorist attack entering mainstream vocabulary when discussing cross-border criminal activity. This linguistic shift reflected a fundamental change in how policymakers conceptualize the cartel crisis, moving it from the realm of law enforcement cooperation into the domain of national security, threats requiring military responses. The rhetorical escalation provided political cover for lawmakers who had previously avoided supporting military intervention. Think tanks that typically advocated for diplomatic solutions began producing policy papers examining potential military options, while academic institutions started hosting conferences on intervention scenarios that would have been considered fringe topics just months earlier. The intellectual infrastructure supporting military intervention expanded rapidly as the Matamoros incident provided concrete justification for theoretical frameworks that had previously lacked real-world applications. The transformation in elite opinion created conditions where military intervention proposals could receive serious consideration rather than immediate dismissal. Congressional committees began requesting briefings on cartel capabilities and potential military responses, while defense contractors started developing presentations on specialized equipment and tactics suited for anti-cartel operations. The policy apparatus that had focused exclusively on supporting Mexican government efforts began examining direct action scenarios. However, the Matamoros incident represented just one data point in a broader pattern of escalating violence that was reaching historic proportions across Mexico. 2025's unprecedented death toll. Mexican government statistics revealed a staggering scale of violence that has made military intervention discussions inevitable. Official reports document over 30,000 homicides annually since 2018, with cartel-related violence accounting for approximately 78% of all deaths, according to preliminary analysis from the National Institute of Statistics and Geography. The states of Guanajuato, Baja California, and Michoacán continue leading in absolute numbers. But the most alarming trend has been the spread of extreme violence into previously stable regions where homicide rates have increased dramatically compared to previous years. Disappearances have reached catastrophic levels that dwarf even the official homicide statistics, with Mexican authorities acknowledging thousands of new cases of forced disappearance each year. The National Registry of Disappeared Persons now contains over 130,000 active cases, but human rights organizations estimate the true number exceeds 200,000 when accounting for families who never report missing relatives due to fear of cartel retaliation. Forensic investigators continue discovering clandestine burial sites containing the remains of thousands of individuals, while the backlog of unidentified bodies in morgues across Mexico has grown to over 52,000 cases. American fentanyl deaths have created an unprecedented crisis, with the CDC reporting 107,000 overdose deaths in 2022, of which 70% were fentanyl-related. Despite provisional data showing a 26.9% drop in U.S. overdose deaths in 2024, the Drug Enforcement Administration confirmed that the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels control 70% of seized drugs entering the United States. The DEA has confirmed that 94% of street fentanyl samples tested positive for additives that increase potency and addiction potential, with new synthetic compounds appearing monthly that existing treatment protocols cannot address effectively. Cartel territorial expansion has accelerated dramatically as organizations exploit weakened government control in regions devastated by ongoing violence. U.S. military estimates indicate that cartels now control approximately one-third of Mexican territory and command combined forces of 160,000 to 185,000 armed fighters. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel now maintains operational presence in the majority of Mexico states, while the Sinaloa Cartel has consolidated control over critical Pacific Coast infrastructure, including major ports. Intelligence assessments indicate that cartels now exercise de facto governmental authority over vast territories, collecting taxes from businesses, operating their own justice systems, and providing basic services that official government cannot deliver. The correlation between expanded cartel control and American drug deaths has become undeniable as territories under cartel administration have become primary production and distribution hubs for fentanyl destined for United States markets. Mexican military intelligence reports that areas with highest cartel territorial control produce significantly more illicit fentanyl than regions where government maintains authority, while shipping routes from cartel-controlled ports account for the majority of precursor chemicals entering Mexico from Chinese suppliers. Border interdiction data shows that most fentanyl seizures occur at crossing points adjacent to territories where cartels maintain complete operational control, indicating the direct relationship between territorial dominance and drug trafficking capacity. Economic devastation has reached levels that threaten the fundamental stability of legitimate Mexican commerce, as cartel extortion networks have expanded beyond traditional targets to encompass virtually every sector of the economy. Financial Times estimates reveal that cartels launder millions of dollars into Mexican political systems, while thousands of companies have permanently ceased operations due to cartel pressure. Agricultural exports to the United States have declined significantly as farmers in cartel-controlled regions abandon their crops rather than pay protection fees that consume most profits, while manufacturing operations in northern Mexico report production delays that have cost American companies billions in lost revenue. Cartel recruitment has reached industrial scale, with the organizations now commanding combined forces that rival the size of many national armies. Major cartels reportedly maintain tens of thousands of active combatants organized into military-style units with specialized roles including reconnaissance, logistics, communications, and assault operations. Recruitment has expanded beyond traditional sources as cartels now actively recruit former military personnel, police officers, and even teenagers through social media campaigns that promise salaries exceeding what legitimate employers can offer in cartel-controlled territories. Military capabilities of major cartels have evolved far beyond simple criminal organizations into sophisticated paramilitary forces that possess equipment and training comparable to national military units in smaller countries. Intelligence reports confirm that cartels have acquired advanced weaponry, armored vehicles, sophisticated communication equipment capable of monitoring government frequencies, and drone technology for both surveillance and offensive operations.